Welcome to Longbox Diving, where we pull comics out of the long box, and I am back. Finally, good grief! It's been a little bit. I've had to move, and then I've had to buy equipment to actually go and get set up so I can start recording again. But I can record again. Yeah. I actually read this comic over the. Let me make sure you can see this well. I read this comic recently. And I really enjoyed it. This is one of the comics I showed off on one of Sunday's. I want to say it's the judging a book by cover that we do, which are always fun. You should check them out if you haven't. Not for kids, but I read it and it was quite interesting to say the least. And honestly, that cover does the book justice, which is always a plus when your cover gives you a hint of what's to come. I love that in comics. And this one does it justice completely. It was an interesting setup, I'll say that. I feel like this is the first book in an arc. And I keep doing this somehow when I pick up a Doctor Strange book. I end up getting some part of like the very end of the very beginning of another arc. But I haven't been disappointed by it yet. It's still the fantastical, the magical. I've got a couple more in there, I think, that I need to read. Same for the Defenders. I picked up some Defenders. And honestly, I haven't been disappointed with the writing, which is what I'm looking for, right? D is very much somebody who likes the action. I like the writing. And the writing's been pretty good in this one. And it does feel like a setup to an arc. You're introduced to the bad guy right off the bat, and his Lancer, his right-hand man. In this case, he's actually a Lancer. That's funny. Or a Spearman, whatever. It was very set up. And I'm going to try to keep it spoiler-free, even though the book is, if I remember correctly, 34 years old. But something happens to Doctor Strange, and his girlfriend of the time, Morgana, has to help. That said, I personally think it'd be really cool if they gave Morgana powers instead of kind of how they do it. Because honestly, Morgana, let's be real here, a Celtic deity, come on. There's no way she's not a goddess somewhere, like the goddess of war. I think that's what Morgana is, if I can remember correctly. But yeah, so it was definitely it was a decent book. I paid pretty well for it. It's like a dollar book, but I really enjoyed it. The writing was fine. We get to see more of life, and actually Wong has Doctor Strange's butler has a really interesting side plot that I'd like to see explored more. But yeah, so if the I'm gonna go into a little bit of spoilers for this book because I kind of like it. If the cover didn't give it away, Morgana essentially becomes Doctor Strange, or better put, Doctor Strange possesses Morgana. And there's a reason for that. But honestly, Morgana's not a trained magician. She really can't, physically stand up to the demons like any other trained magician would be able to. Like if Scarlet Witch was there, perfectly fine, right? But Morgana's not Scarlet Witch. And so, there's only so much Doctor Strange can do as an astral projection to really help out, and that's interesting. I want to see where this one goes. Because Doctor Strange had to get into some really desperate abilities that, honestly, not the best thing for him to do. And that's probably going to come at a cost, but he was running out of everything else he could do. And that was just the Lancer. That was the Lancer, guys. That was the sidekick. Because Doctor Strange is fighting another Sorcerer Supreme from another world, which is awesome. I love when that happens. And looks like this world is very warrior focused, right? Swords and spears and armor. And that's cool. That's cool. And I want to find the rest of this arc here because I like it. I may end up just buying it online so that way I can actually read it. But yeah, I would definitely... if you like the fantasy stuff, and you also like heavier plot lines as opposed to just fighting. I would definitely recommend checking out these older Doctor Stranges because it does have the fighting, and this one has quite a bit of it, right? There's at least 3 scenes that I can think of where there was fighting going on, but it's also heavy narrative with magic. And I see this as a trend with Doctor Strange, right? And this is a common trend with Doctor Strange, and it's a good way to go about it, right? Doctor Strange is a powerful magician, and so he's either fighting like world-breaking monsters or universe-destroying entities, that kind of stuff, where these are things so powerful that Doctor Strange struggles to keep up with them. And of course, he's the hero, so most of the time he actually wins. Most of the time. Then there's other times where Doctor Strange is stripped of his abilities for some reason. Whether in this book it was his body died. Like, his body died, he's now an astral projection. He knows all the spells, he knows all the abilities, he knows what to do. He just doesn't have hands to do them. And so he has to find ways to do things in a different manner, or he has to tap into things that are easier to do with devastating consequences. And so that's typically what I've been seeing with Doctor Strange, and I love that as a trope, right? Like Last Days of Magic. I haven't read all of it yet, but The Last Days of Magic is such a great idea, especially if executed well. And I could probably read this trope a bunch if it's spaced out well in between the world-breaking monsters, and you combine the two, and it works really well, I think, because you have your Last Days of Magic where just the ability to do these things that you used to be able to do is gone for whatever reason. But you know how to do them. You know all the words and the hand motions, but you don't know. But you can't get access to it, right? For some reason. And so you're forced to do things that are either detestable, but easier, and honestly with the same devastating consequences, and will achieve your effect, or you're forced to find another way to do them. And that's great. It's a great contrast and balance between I am one of the like Doctor Strange is one of the most powerful people in the universe, and he's fighting some crazy entities, and that's great. And then there's always consequences, or there should be. If there isn't, then that's a problem. But yeah, I definitely would recommend picking up some of these older Doctor Stranges because I have fun with them, and it's very fantasy. Fantasy problems with mages and wizards and stuff in a sci-fi world, because as it stands, Doctor Strange is very sci-fi in its setting, right? So you have space, you have universes, you have astral monsters and excuse me, Lovecraftian horrors and stuff, and it's a very sci-fi world. Even Earth, it's very sci-fi, and that's just the superhero genre. Is you have all these crazy powers that people are given mostly by science or accident caused by science, right? There are exceptions, and that's where the fantasy stuff comes in, like gods and magic, and but those aren't the norm. And Doctor Strange leans so heavily into that fantasy side of it, and it's really enjoyable because you end up with just the weird stuff that fantasy can come up with in a sci-fi world, and sci-fi has weird monsters. It does, and it's great. I love it, and I'm probably going to keep picking up more of this, and if I can find more of this specific run, I will. But yeah, I'm definitely a fan of these books, and I would definitely recommend it if you like that fantasy stuff and like a heavy narrative. Alright, that's all for this time. I'll see you next time in the long box.